So just to start at the beginning, the mining planet is just lacks kind of identity. It's meant to be a company town, but I don't think it really captures what is awful about company towns, like why they don't work and why they are kind of de facto slavery and stuff like that. Like these things have existed in history, and you could just spend an evening on Wikipedia and just make a list of ways in which company towns don't work and are vehicles for exploitation, and then translate that into the alien universe, and you would have gotten something more interesting.
Does it need to have to do that though? Because I think I just saw that as a vehicle to introduce the motivation.
Yeah, but we spent like 20 minutes on it. I'm just saying, while you were at it, you could have done something more interesting with the same basic idea. And we've not really seen that kind of colony like from the inside before, right? A little bit, like there's some colonist stuff in Aliens, but we've spent more time inside a Weyland-Yutani facility than we've ever spent before, I think. And even like in Aliens, when Ripley is on like the medical ship and whatever, and like that's not the average person's experience, right? And here we get the ground level view. So that's all. Like, that's a great place to start. I'm just saying it wasn't terribly interesting. Like they could have put some more interesting stuff in there. But then the real problem is that the scenario makes zero sense. So basically, the idea that a couple of teenagers or people in their early 20s just have a spaceship they can use and can just fly around makes no sense. Like if they're so impoverished and the control of the company is so complete, why can't they do this? And I think that's an active conflict with the setting that's been set up before. And then also the idea that there's just a space station with expensive gear just floating in orbit and nobody has taken a look. Like there's no corporate security. Nobody's interested. It just defies reason. And I think there would have been a way to get them to the space station in a way that didn't have these problems, where you could have contrived a situation where it's clear maybe they are the salvage crew or something, and then they realize, hey, we have functioning cryopods on board. And we've been talking about trying to get off planet, but now we actually can. It's easy to come up with something, and they just didn't. And the whole thing is just a vehicle to get them onto the space station so that alien stuff can happen. But I'm just saying we've spent so much time getting them there that we could have done something more interesting, or skip all of that and just have them arrive at the station and have a couple of lines of dialogue that explains why they're there. Either would have worked better than what we got, in my opinion.
I agree with that. I do agree that didn't fully make sense. But I do think in terms of like the first year, I did think it was a bit slow, but at the same time, it was like a great way of just introducing the whole character motivation, because it was like this, especially like the introduction of Andy and then finding out that Andy wouldn't be able to get onto the was it a planet that they were trying to get to?
Synthetics are banned in the system where they're going.
Yeah. So
he would be killed once they get there.
Yeah, so a planet or some pretty much where they were going to wouldn't accept this freaking Andy. So I think for me that first scene was great in terms of just, character motivation, and it was emotionally triggering, man. Like even when you see Andy, and I didn't even know that was a freaking brother. So for me, that revelation was, I don't know why it did something for me. I was like, okay, that's so he's a synthetic. It's a bit slow, and you are right. It didn't really make sense how the hell they had access to that spaceship, but it was great in terms of just, character motivation, and it kind of already had you invested in that character, because you're always going to have that sense of awe when it comes to just Andy's character. Do you know what I'm saying? And having having a protector of a character like that, you're going to get emotionally invested in both characters. So I think that scene was pretty good in terms of just audience connection to the characters.
But it feels forced. Is my problem with it? Like again, I agree with you in terms of like it's serviceable enough in terms of like understanding character motivation, understanding like about like Andy and him being a little bit more vulnerable than to know like the rest and stuff like that. But then it just becomes a little bit forced, because like she's like it doesn't really make sense why she's had to like leave him outside when she's kind of like going to speak to the woman that I can't remember what like the conversation was about, but like when she was like trying to like say that she's worked up her time, essentially didn't quite make sense why she left Andy outside, apart from the fact that he just needs to get jumped by a group of kids for the audience to like feel sorry for him. I kind of like in between both of you, where it could have been done a lot better in terms of like it informing the character motivation. Like this is like essentially like the spark that's going to set her on like her journey essentially, and her friends. But they did just about enough for you to be like, okay, I understand what's going on and what like the story is. Okay, like now let's get to the space station.
You just have to ignore all the specifics and just say, okay, they want to get away because it's an awful place. Mm-hmm. And they can only do that with the equipment that's on the space station. Yeah. That's all that matters. Everything else is detail. And if the detail is not terribly interesting, why do it? And I didn't time it, but it's probably over 20 minutes until we get to the space station. All of that could have been cut. Like maybe have just a scene where they're approaching the station and we get the character introductions as they're waiting for the docking sequence to finish or something, right? It just wasn't necessary, and given that it wasn't necessary, it should be good.